Unless someone like you cares a whole awful lot, nothing is going to get better. It's not. Welcome to Unless, the podcast, inspired by that Dr. Seuss quote from the Lorax that reminds us of the role we can each play in making the world a better place. Join Dr. Hemma Lomax and her guests as they share incredible stories of being moved to decisive action and perseverance, leading to tangible impact at scale. This podcast is a production of Corporate Compliance Insights.
Hello and welcome back to Unless, the podcast. Now, you know that this podcast is based on the quote from Dr. Seuss, unless someone like you cares a whole awful lot, nothing is going to get better. It's not. Those words from Dr. Seuss are the inspiration for this podcast, and they remind us that change is not automatic. It is chosen and it's created. So today we're exploring change at its deepest level, inside our own minds. And my special guest is Dr. Justin James Kennedy, Professor of Applied Neuroscience, founder of NPN Hub and Neuroplasticitynews.com, and author of the book Brain Reboot. Now, I highly recommend these resources. I'm a member of NPN Hub, and you're going to understand why once you meet Dr. Kennedy. His life's work is helping leaders, coaches, and organizations understand the power of neuroplasticity, and he shows us how a change of mind can literally change the brain. In this episode, we'll follow his journey through discovery, skepticism, transformation, and legacy. We will learn what it means to be a neuroplastician, why caring about the brain is caring about the future, and how each of us can use these insights to shape a meaningful legacy. Dr. Kennedy, welcome to Unless, the podcast.
You're so wonderful. Thank you for that great introduction, Hemma.
I'd love to start at the beginning of your journey. Every hero story starts with a call to adventure. So what first drew you into neuroscience, not just as theory, but as the path you had to walk yourself?
So the short version of the long story is that I was initially attracted to study psychology, and I was studying to be a psychologist, and I was riding on a motorbike one day back from work, and some drunk driver came out of nowhere and knocked me off the bike. Ended up with a traumatic brain injury after flying through the sky, and that ended up in a subdural hemorrhage, which is a bleeding on the brain. That led into being in a coma. And that's where the journey into neuroscience began, Hemma.
Wow, they say needs must. My goodness, what an entrance into this world.
The wrong side of the table.
Yes. So a Vespa accident, no doubt a long rehabilitation. What was hardest emotionally, and how did it shape your view of neuroplasticity?
Well, the first thing was that I couldn't move. So that was like very, very, very anxiety provoking. And I wasn't like in locked in syndrome. It wasn't there, but it was pretty difficult to move. And so my first task was to get my mobility back. The second thing was being able to speak coherently again. So that was, pretty difficult because those part of my brain was where the damage happened. And when I get stressed, I start to jumble words, a bit like everybody, but sometimes even more so because of the brain damage. And surprisingly, at the time, was the most difficult thing to learn was to control my emotions. I would go from crying to shouting in the space of a few milliseconds. So, becoming emotionally intelligent was a neurological opportunity. So, so relatively slow recovery, but I'm back here, and I'm pretty much full function, except for the fact that over the last couple of years, I've started having epileptic seizures. Obviously, my brain's getting old now, and the scarring tissue is obviously interrupting those pathways. So, I've had maybe a dozen seizures, and it isn't nice, especially for people around you, because they've got to deal with you. But it has built out some of the opportunities. So that's the journey out of medicine and into neuroscience.
Fascinating. And what's underlying what you said there is that you were aware that something was different and that you wanted to get back on a journey to get to, I think you described it as emotional intelligence, but to being happy again, to being functional again. That moment of decision, tell us about that and how important it was for you to decide that you needed to do something differently to get to where you needed to be.
Well, it's so long ago now. I remember my brain was pretty foggy at the time. So it was, I don't know, it was driven by the fact that my girlfriend at the time had left me because I was being such a difficult character. It was driven by, a sense of anxiety, it was driven by a sense of basically losing control. So it was, it was, it was a call to arms in the most emotional sense.
No, I understand that. I think in Brain Reboot, the book you wrote, you said that a change of mind will change your brain. Is that right?
Really love that quote. Uh, I'm really thought that was a really clever quote.
Yes.
And it all starts with changing your intention. So the goal for my, reboot was really saying, okay, let's have another go. There is a second chance, so let me make the most of it. And I got back into studies. Obviously, I didn't finish the studies to be a psychologist because I was kind of busy. And but when I recovered, I really got interested in neuroscience and specifically neuroplasticity was becoming to the fore at that time. So I got very interested in what happens in the brain as it builds new pathways, as it learns to function and reprocess information. So that became the focus of my work, and the thesis was looking at the executive function of the executive's brain and looking at how this can influence your work and influence your function, not only professionally but personally as well.
Now, obviously, you've gone deep into it. We're going to talk a little bit about how you've been able to serve your community with everything you've learned. But before we do that, can you maybe, for the uninitiated, explain what neuroplasticity is? Not everyone might not be familiar with this term.
Neuroplasticity is a very long, fancy word saying how the brain can find and build new pathways and learn new information and how it can go about growing throughout life. Or even, having damage like neuroplasticity can be caused through brain cancer or through a traumatic brain injury. But plasticity in the positive sense, positive neuroplasticity is about how you can build new pathways, learn new tools and skills and habits. And it really all comes down to habits because you can build new pathways, but if you don't nurture them, they won't become much. It's as you may remember, Hemma, I'm from South Africa, and a great analogy is of a path that buffalo make through the hills as they go down to the river to have a drink of water. And after generations, they build a very clear, very deep grooved path, which they make. And if one of them finds a quicker path or a better path for whatever reason, that's not going to have much dent in the grass or on the hills. So it's going to take a lot of time for that new pathway, even though it's better, to be built, and it's going to take a lot of time to convince other buffalo to go down the path with them. So you need to keep walking the path to build your neuroplasticity.
That's right. And I guess the good news for our listeners is you don't have to have gone through a terrible accident to be able to use these practical insights of neuroplasticity. This is relevant to all of us every day. Is that a fair statement?
Every day we have neuroplastic events that facilitate new insights or new epiphanies or new learning that happens. And the more we take notice of those and then say, okay, this is the thing that I'm going to do. So a quick story is that I recently completed some German tests to complete my German citizen. So here's my skills going again. To complete my German citizenship, and I crammed for those exams, like a teenager who was trying to dodge his exams, and I finished it, and I got through the exams relatively well, actually. But none of that, not none, but 80% of that knowledge hasn't stuck in my brain. So you can cram and you can hack the system, but you don't get the skill. So if you want to learn German or to play the flute, you've got to build a habit around rehearsal. And the most important thing is that you have to find a positive association. Unlike me and German, I struggle with the language so much. I like to blame the fact that I had brain damage and it's hard for me to learn new languages, but I don't think that's a fair enough excuse. But anyway, it was the only one I had, and what I found, Hemma, is that if you working as a coach or as a practitioner or a facilitator of some kind, even as a leader in an organization, if you build those positive cues into the people that you are trying to lead or coach, you're going to get a much better outcome. So if you make it the carrot, not the stick, you're going to get more likely sustained positive neuroplasticity.
Yes, so smart and so relatable. I mean, this is what I love about your work and the community that you've built around the Neuroplasticians Network Hub, because there's practical applications of this. I mean, actually, many of us have got good intentions and we need to operationalize them, but the answer is inside this science. The answer is inside these pathways. So I love that you share these practical tests. And as you described that, I'm reminded of the performance and wellness model that you've written about. Is that what you're talking about there, with the rehearsal and then the good sensations around it, or is that something different? Tell me about performance and wellness.
I suppose all roads lead to the brain, huh?
Yes.
And um, I did some research and I published some work in the environment of looking at the relationship between well-being and performance within the organizational context.
Hmm.
So I like to laugh to people to say I own the domain of organizational well-being neuroscience as an acronym. So the idea of the own model is to really show organizations that if you don't build an environment of well-being that sustains and enhances well-being, the you're not going to get the kind of performance that you ideally would like, because you can't sustain it. If you want to sprint, you got to get fit, and if you want to manage conflict, you got to build emotionally intelligent environments. So you got to build those social functions. So it's not really complicated if you think about it, make the place nice, make the people nicer, and performance will follow.
And this is such a timely reminder to all of us, especially when I work in the corporate environment, and certainly there's insecurity around, being laid off, and we all have to do more with less. Will AI replace us? All of these insecurities are the exact opposite, I think, of what the conditions you're describing. So you have coined this area just at the right time when we need you the most. I came to you because I was looking for some help in this space, right? I'm an ethics and culture builder in an organization. I want to learn some skills and tips and tricks to make sure we're doing this for our customers, the people we serve. So can you share perhaps one or two practical things, brain-friendly daily practices that our listeners can try today that will help with this?
The simple truth that it's not complicated.
Hmm.
It is about making some decisions. So if you're looking at building well-being, you've got to just get into a healthier body, because people might not know this, but the brain is part of a bigger system called the body, and it needs to be nurtured as part of the system. So, you need to get yourself in a functional, healthy body so that you are giving your brain the best chance possible. Then, in order to build neuroplasticity, once you've got that foundation in place, you don't need to have that foundation, but it obviously makes things so much more likely. In order to do that effectively, it's about finding challenges that are exciting. So it's about finding things that you enjoy doing that are hard. And it's quite a difficult thing. Let's think about it for a second, Emma. So what is something that is hard for you that is fun?
I'll give you an example. Learning the language or playing a musical instrument. Two of the things I love to do, but certainly not easy.
So if you love doing it, then you're going to do it more often. The motivation isn't so hard to get into the routine. So once you've found that thing, it's then about building a routine every day after brushing your teeth or before brushing your teeth, or whatever you can find is a spot in your day where you do that thing. So first part is about finding something fun and intrinsically motivating. Second is about finding the routine. And third is about making that a habit. Okay. And then the next part is very important, and it's about making it a social activity. So if you're playing an instrument, you may not be in a band or you may be doing it at home, but it's important for you to have audience in the sense that you're part of a community or you share on social media so that people can applaud your learning. So they can say, yes, well done, you've learned hymn number 3 or whatever you might be learning in your music or whatever the task is. So having that social recognition is huge. People forget that humans are intelligent as a species because we are very good at crowdsourcing. We are
Yes.
very good at building pyramids together. Alone, we don't do so well, but as a collective, we do some incredible things. We don't land on the moon by ourselves. It's a team effort. So teaming is such an important part of building that neuroplasticity pathways because it just bumps up the levels of the neurotransmitter oxytocin, and that feels good. So you get a double benefit out of it.
So insightful, this idea of celebrating those wins, but celebrating them with others. And I think you're the first guest that's given me a reason why social media can be used for good. So well done. You know, using
No,
social media for
take
good
it,
is what
take
we're
it
looking
back. I take it back.
No, no, no. I love it. I love it. We'll stay there. And it's a perfect transition to where I wanted to go next because, in this hero's journey that you've gone through, the traveler doesn't keep the treasure for themselves either, right? It's one thing to celebrate with others, but it's another thing to grow, to give, and to share your wisdom with others. And one of the reasons I found you, as I said, was because one thing I'm excited about learning, repeated pathways, is how to use neuroplasticity at work. And you've created a community, to your point. You've created some teaming around this for people like me who are interested in learning and getting up to speed with what you do. So let's talk a bit about the NPN Hub and how you've created a global movement of neuroplasticians. Let's talk about that return with this elixir for the people you serve. Why build NPN
This,
Hub and what does it give practitioners beyond courses?
this is such a nice story to tell. So one day, I'm speaking to a PhD candidate, and they say they also want to research neuroplasticity. And I say, go, that's going to be so much fun. Let's do it. And they said they don't want to research neuroplasticity per se. They want to build out an institute. And I said, okay, sure, why not? And they said they want to build out an institute where they can have the competencies around what it means to apply neuroplasticity. And I said, okay, wonderful. And you've got to support your PhD candidates, of course. And they said, no, we've got to make sure that people apply neuroplasticity most effectively. And in order to do that, we need to look at the competencies and build out the discipline of the neuroplastician. And we were high-fiving for the whole of the day. We got so excited with ourselves, Hemma. 5 months later, we've trademarked the word and built out the platform, built even an app, we had a whole thing. We convinced some of the other PhD candidates to join us. I have a lot of people following on LinkedIn, so we started speaking to people on LinkedIn, and we invited some leading thinkers in the environment of applied neuroscience to join our advisory board, and we mapped out the competencies, and we now have a very robust neuroplastician credential, which isn't a training program. It is an award based on your application. So there are many training providers who offer training to improve neuroplasticity tools and interventions as a coach or as an educator or as a therapist or as a consultant or any practitioner. So there's a lot of ways in which you can become a neuroplastician through training. The Institute doesn't offer that. It offers an accreditation, an award that you have done the work. And one of the interesting stories is that I wrote an article about this for my blog on Psychology Today. And there's a very famous professor out of California called Paul Zak, who's done some incredibly interesting work in the role of oxytocin and the application of neuroscience and neuroeconomics. And anyway, he's such a well-respected academic. He's like the most respected and referenced academics, like in the top 0.3. Anyway, so no, Paul's big, okay. And on one of my blogs, I see a note from Paul Zak. And I said, oh, there's a guy with the same name as the Paul Zak. And I look into it and he says, oh, thank you for citing me on your article. Many people don't know how to use an APA referencing anymore. So it felt like Muhammad or Jesus had just read my blog. So anyway, so we connected, and he started telling me about the work he was doing and how he's been developing technology to scan the brain and get measurements of oxytocin and dopamine all via your watch and your smartphone. So what we have done with them is we've built out a coaching program where you can apply the technology most effectively with your clients and your colleagues. So it's a really interesting program how you can actually use real empirical real-time data to support your interventions, which is really exciting.
Very exciting. It's another thing that I'm very excited about. We talked about Neurostarter, and even Elon Musk, another South African, famous South Africans, come up with Neuralink. So we know that the technology is advancing here, and this is exactly the right time to understand the human brain so that we can interact with it effectively. So no, I love that. I love that you've done that. And just sticking a second with the NPN Hub, as I said, I'm a member, and I feel like I found my people.
Oh,
And
that's so
many,
lovely.
many people that I will learn so much from. But you're right, there's many people that have been doing this work on their own or in their own communities, and to bring them together across the globe in that way is magnificent. So well done. Well done to your PhD student as well for having the audacity to dream big
Yeah,
and
it
come
is
to you.
amazing. Yeah.
No, I love it. I love it. I guess before we close, I did want to ask you a little bit about, you've talked about the technology. What excites you most about the technology that's coming into this space?
I think it's validating all the things that we believed.
Ah,
And now we have empirical data to back it up. We used to know if I had a gut feeling that it's probably true, and now we know that the serotonin levels in the stomach are influenced by our perception. So if we perceive danger, it influences our serotonin and our stomachs don't feel so settled. In the same way that if my heart misses a beat, we can see that the neurocardiology down the vagus and many other nerves, we can see that information is accurate, that there is a correspondence between the heart and the brain. So the neuroscience is doing a lot of stuff
Mm.
to validate. And as you know, Hemma, the scientist is always the last person to get to the party. They're always the last person to arrive. And so when all the hippies have finished the punch, the scientists get there. And what we are seeing so much is that there is so much useful information now out there, and what the science is able to justify and validate. Obviously, not all of the hokey pokey is accurate, but there's a lot of stuff that has been used, and also what it's doing, Emma, it's giving us opportunity to have real-time intervention.
Mm.
So when we are using technology, like the immersion technology for coaches, we can see that it helps you have an intervention with a client in real time. You see, okay, so we can see the dopamine levels aren't corresponding with what you're saying, or we can see that you're having a moment of insight during this event, or you are having a moment of psychological safety in these conversations, or you're not, for example. So it gives you opportunity to have really rich conversations. So it's really interesting to say that. And Greg is actually leading the cohort on the immersion neuroscience coaches. So if you want me to connect you with him, I'm sure you'd love to hear more.
I do. I would love to learn from him, maybe have him as a guest as well. It was just so exciting and curious. I think people don't realize that brain science has evolved rapidly in the last couple of decades. Like we used to just test on animals or just test on
Mm.
people that had died, or maybe people with mental illnesses, but not necessarily, or brain issues, but not necessarily on the live, in-person, active, healthy humans. So the fact that we can do that work is mind-blowing, to excuse the pun. And I think
Really.
I'm so curious because we've all got a brain, we're all using it every minute of every day, but we're not spending much time applying the science. So I love that you are leading the charge there, and bringing the people together to do that. So,
That's so
okay,
interesting, isn't it? It's so interesting how the science is evolving. It used to be looking at pathology, and
yes.
it's really moved now into the space of well-being and performance. So there is opportunity for us to, keep the conversation alive for sure.
Right. And back to you said, find something that you're passionate about or interested in. The companies we serve are interested in performance. So I love that you've tied the two things. It's not wellness for wellness' sake. It's not something you do after you finish work. It's actually helping you get the performance that you want and unleashing human potential, so to speak. So
Yeah,
brilliant, brilliant. Well,
exactly.
I know I don't want to end this conversation. I know we have to wrap up. So I might ask you, indulge me in a quick lightning round of a few words of wisdom. Let's ask you first, one influential book or thinker that you would recommend we look into.
Sure, there's so many books. Which genre?
Well, let's stick with mind science, neuroplasticity.
Okay, the recent book from Paul Zak called Immersion was really a big book because it's influenced so much on how we are applying the empirical science in real time for helping practitioners get to understand how the brain is working via their phones, on their wrists with their smartwatches. So that's a big book for me at the moment.
Interesting. I'll make sure I put a link to that with the show notes. One daily practice that you personally rely on.
Not meditation. I find meditation very, very, very difficult. So I'm not really answering your question, but I find the daily practice that gives me the most joy is swimming. So it's summer here still, so I go swimming as often as possible. My wife likes paddleboarding, and I think I was born without a balancing gene because going paddleboarding is like the most it's the most exhausting thing you wouldn't believe. So not paddleboarding, not meditation, swimming for
Yes,
sure. That's something.
swimming.
So it's really about finding an activity that's healthy that you enjoy doing. So that's the take home for me. There are so many things, but the one thing that I mentioned earlier that I think is the most important is that we're living in an epidemic of loneliness. So being intentional about building relationships that you enjoy, friends or family, if you have social engagement with them, joining a club or a sports club is a really good one. So find a hobby that has other people involved. It makes a huge difference to your neuroplasticity.
I love that. Okay, I'm going to ask you one last question, if I'm going to be indulgent. I'm going to take you back to where we started at the accident that inspired all of
Yeah.
this. I think you've said that there was a moment, one of your biggest milestones in your recovery was feeling happy again. And I was really quite moved by that. Can you share what that meant with you when you said you felt happy again?
This is such a big question. It might get emotional. So let me. So for me at the time, there were two parts to that happiness. One was about actually there was three. No, let's call it two. The first was about to be able to do stuff, to hold a conversation or to move around. Um, so that was the first part, just to have physical function again. And the second part was to deeply connect with my emotional well-being or my emotional state, and therefore have rich social dialogue and rich social relationships. So those were the two sides of the happy coin.
So powerful. And again, what's so moving, it is moving. I feel like it moved me when I read that, is that you didn't only do that for yourself and do the hard work that was doing that for yourself, but you are now out in the world doing that for others and ensuring others can feel happy again in many different ways of their lives. So thank you so much. Again, I'm going to repeat this podcast is named after the doctor's use quote in the Lorax: unless someone like you, Justin, cares a whole awful lot, nothing is going to get better. It's not. I do believe neuroplasticity is the science that proves this is true. Because when we care enough to change our minds, we can really change lives and organizations and our world. So thank you for what you do. Thank you for joining me. Thank you for welcoming me into the community. And I'd love to continue to explore with you. I want to be that PhD student that creates with you. So thank you for being
Please
that
do.
welcoming, and I'm really grateful to you for joining us on the podcast today.
It's been an honor. Thank you, Emma. This is great work.